One thing that I have learned is that hoping it never happens to you is not a very effective emergency management plan, nor a recovery plan. I'm not going out on a limb on that one, but it is something that we need to recognize. We don't want to face these things. We don't want to deal with these things on a regular basis, but it's amazing what a minimal amount of work on the front end can do for the recovery aspect on the back end.
Welcome to Medical Money Matters, the podcast where you can find experts, answers, and resources so that you can achieve mastery over the financial and business aspects of your practice. Welcome back to another episode of Medical Money Matters, where we explore the business side of medicine, the topics physicians were never taught in medical school that need to master to build healthy, thriving practices. Today, we're talking about a topic that many healthcare leaders don't think about until they're in the middle of a crisis: business continuity planning. My guest is my friend Christopher Riccardi, Manager of Emergency Management and Business Continuity at Rady Children's Hospital, Orange County. Chris has dedicated his career to helping healthcare organizations prepare for disasters, emergencies, and unexpected disruptions while ensuring that patient care can continue safely. He is nationally recognized for his leadership in healthcare emergency management, pediatric disaster preparedness, and enterprise business continuity planning, and he routinely presents regionally and nationally to medical groups and hospitals. Whether you're leading a private practice, a large medical group, or specialty clinic, today's conversation will be packed with practical insights to help you protect your patients, your staff, and your business when the unexpected happens. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Greetings, Jill. Honored to be here. Great to see you again, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, and likewise. And we should probably start by telling the audience that we first connected in a random airline seating pattern 11 years ago on a flight. I believe it was between Los Angeles and Portland. And within about 2 minutes, we established that we were both in healthcare. And then the conversation took off from there. So I am ever so grateful. It was probably Alaska Airlines, and I'm ever so grateful for the random seat assignment that had you sitting next to me.
That was great.
Yeah. Let us jump in. Let's start with the basics. So when you hear the term business continuity planning, what does that actually mean? And why should physician practices and not just hospitals care about it?
One fantastic question, and it's one that I get asked relatively often about what is business continuity. When we look at any type of a process, to find the answer specifically, it is literally maintaining business after, during any crisis events, any disruptive events, and how do we put tools and plans in place to be able to, one, recover effectively, but also minimize the financial impact, any of our brand image issues, as well as ensuring the safety of our patients and our staff. We deal with 4 phases of emergency management with mitigation, preparedness, response. The recovery is the 4th phase, and that would be where business continuity comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. I like those 4 phases. It's a bit like patient care, how we sort of think about our wellness as a phase as well. So I know this because I used to run clinics way back in the day. And I know that a lot of medical groups sort of assume it won't happen to us, or we don't really need to worry about that. So what are some of the most common disruptions that you've seen that can threaten the practice's ability to operate?
One, both of us live in an area that is earthquake prone. That could cause some severe disruptions, and not just the shaking and an increase in our blood pressure in terms of what we need to do. But you think about the downstream effects of an earthquake. It could interrupt our utilities, our electricity, our roads, the buildings infrastructure in and of itself, as just one example of an event that could disrupt. We've lived through COVID just recently. We just endured just 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, a pediatric surge of medical patients once the kids started going back to school, being exposed to COVID. There was a triple-demic, if you will, with RSV. So there's infectious disease things out there as well. We're dealing at this stage of our unbelievably that we're dealing with vaccine hesitancy. So we're starting to see the downstream effects of those issues. And that in and of itself poses its problems. And the one thing that I have learned is that hoping it never happens to you is not a very effective emergency management plan, nor a recovery plan. I'm not going out on a limb on that one, but it is something that we need to recognize. We don't want to face these things. We don't want to deal with these things on a regular basis, but it's amazing what a minimal amount of work on the front end can do for the recovery aspect on the back end. I don't know how many clinics may shut down over a year. I did a little quick search a little while ago that showed that after disaster events, folks that have shut down based on that disaster was somewhere around 6 that do not get back into business after these events. And it was, like I said, this is a random search that provided me with this information from the wise ones at Google and various other locations. But it struck out to me. And this is permanent loss. This is not something you're going to recover from. And again, it's usually behind the lack of mitigation, preparedness, and response abilities that caused disruption and make recovery not even an option.
No, that's a point well made. I certainly don't want to be one of the clinics that just never recovers from whatever the disaster was. So that's key. And so that's a great segue. So if you were walking into a physician practice today that hadn't done any continuity planning at all, where would you tell them to begin? Like, what would be sort of the first 3 things every practice should have in place?
I'll start with the first one, and that is understanding your risk. Understanding the risk of your environment. Many of us commute to where we work. We don't necessarily live in the place we do work. So we don't necessarily understand the risk. Many don't even understand the risks of where they live and understanding what a hazard vulnerability analysis may be. These are accessible through their state websites or city websites as well. But understanding your risk, what are your risks? And as I mentioned earlier, earthquake, probably you may be dealing with aging electrical infrastructure, any of your power grid. We just had a water main break in Hollywood just yesterday that caused major event. And that again is aging infrastructure. So there's a whole lot of folks without water right now. But what does that look like? Understand what those risks may be. You may have factories, you may have chemical plants. We had an event here in Garden Grove that had a chemical tank that we were given 2 options when it was discovered, that it was either going to blow up or it was going to leak and outgas some pretty toxic stuff into our environment. So there are things about understanding your risk. And once you're able to understand your risk, then you could start putting tools in place to prepare for an event that may happen based on those risks. You don't want to be planning for, like in Southern California, we don't plan necessarily for blizzards, right? Because I appreciate the aspect, but it's a really unlikely event.
Not likely.
In Orange County, California.
Yeah.
But within your own realm, there are things that would be prevalent. At least be aware so that you can start to put tools in place to deal with those mitigation. The mitigation of these that is low-hanging fruit. Like with earthquakes, we know that we have earthquakes. What do we do about that? We strap water heaters to the wall so that they don't tip over after an earthquake. Don't have gas leaks that would then cause a fire, maybe blow up your practice.
Yeah.
Or flooding, right? These are all realistic downstream events of what could potentially happen. Yeah. You saw Venezuela, what just happened down there after a pretty heavy earthquake. But that is identifying what happens in places that don't have building codes. We have to live in an environment where building codes are a necessity. It may be arduous to work through when we're building new things, trying to get approval for things. But when you look at what those building codes are there to do, they could potentially save not only your life, your patients' lives, but your practice as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we've done a lot of learning over the past several years that resilience is about much more than just surviving a hurricane or a wildfire or earthquake. So, and you mentioned earlier, COVID. Let's talk about that a little bit. How has COVID changed the way healthcare organizations think about business continuity and operational resilience?
COVID was a unicorn, and I hope it was a unicorn. That is
Let's
not
hope it was a unicorn.
we had to do a lot of work on the fly. There were plans in place that weren't followed. There were different things in place that were never maintained, supplies, equipment that would have mitigated a lot of the scrambling that took place. And of course, the lack of early response caused some downstream effects that it took quite a long time to recover from.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get too far down that path, but in terms of what we put in place for a process like this, we need to now identify how we can maintain social distancing. What kind of filtration do we put into buildings?
Yeah.
How do we, again, there are at least vaccines out there that can be helpful, but they don't work if you don't get them. That is another thing. And in the community in which I thrive here, there is a 50-50 chance that folks will protect themselves. I'm going to try to remain as diplomatic as possible, but we see that these things are out there. Also, our stores or supplies of PPE, personal protective equipment, masks, gloves, gowns. How do we protect our staff and ourselves from being exposed to those that may be coming in that are ill? We've been able to improve those personal protective equipment items, such as using powered purifying respirators and various things that we can do to protect ourselves. Understanding whether or not folks need to be in negative pressure rooms, mitigating the risk of exposure. But one of the other things that I marveled at was many of the practices, because I also have, my purview is also over the 42 offsite clinics that are under the Rady Children's Health umbrella. And in doing so, I found with a clean room and a dirty room and how to segregate those that are ill from those that are symptomatic from those that are not, that may just be there for routine medical care. But that routine medical care is not something that is accessed when there's a fear of getting to the doctor's office and being exposed to these things. So creating a safe environment, creating that location education. And when I say that, I don't mean putting it out through social media, but actually educating your clientele, your patient population, that you are a trusted source in their realm. They're coming to you for care. How do you provide the safest environment for that? But again, learning through what COVID did and the disruptive process, we were in it for 3 years.
Yeah.
It was heavy duty for the first year and a half, but waned and ebbed and flowed for another 6 months or so. But there were still mitigating issues and response issues that were in place to keep us moving along. In a pediatric environment, we don't have the luxury of saying we'll cancel elective surgery. Right. There are no such things as elective surgeries with pediatric patients.
Yep.
So we had to create new space to care for patients, and using non-traditional space, getting waivers to be able to utilize this. We got to explore and build an infrastructure to assist us in surging into the future. But many folks just stopped after the COVID process, and they just said, you know what, we don't want to talk about it anymore. We don't want to go down that path. And I think many missed opportunities, not only for funding, but also to build in your infrastructure is how would you prepare for the next? Yeah. In my realm, if we don't learn by the lessons we've just experienced, that puts us in a pretty bad place.
Yeah. You make an excellent point too. There's a certain amount of fatigue for folks that have come through that. And we're seeing the long-term effects of that now. There's still a lot of early retirement clinicians that are leaving the industry, and probably before they would ordinarily. So a lot of that. But yeah, I think that's you make an excellent point. It's like, don't rest on your laurels, feeling like, okay, great, we've survived COVID, but rather use it as an opportunity to take a look at what worked, what didn't work, where you can sort of upgrade your plans and upgrade your.
And again, this goes back to identifying your risk.
Yep.
You obviously had a risk. Did you improve that risk? Did you do anything to improve what would happen the next time, if there is a next time? Yeah. And again, hoping it never happens is not an effective response.
Yeah, not really an effective way to do it. Thank you for that. That's one of those walks down memory lane nobody wants to take, but it's important to do so, just to say, yeah, what have we learned? And your question is great. How have we improved our operation based on the lessons learned? So that's fantastic. Yeah, we all hope we don't ever have to go through that again. But Whew.
That's my hope.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about a different kind of risk, and that's the cybersecurity, which is increasingly becoming an operational risk facing healthcare today. So, if a medical practice suddenly lost access to its electronic health record system, what should the response look like inside of those first critical few hours?
Sure. And that great question. And this is the topic of conversation on a normal basis with me as well. We're doing a national tabletop next week based on a cyber event. But the intrusion into your environment is going to be critical. I don't know what type of IT infrastructure you have in your practice, but that is critical in being able to isolate an intrusion. And this is where I've learned well from my cybersecurity folks here in my environment. It's really, it can be really smart when you're hanging around a lot smarter folks, but they help educate me as well, just in terms of how we isolate, how we would go down that path. But something that should be noted within an electronic health record system, things that you may have brought on, I don't need to get into names of these systems, but as you start working through them, every one of them comes with a downtime procedure. There are downtime forms that would come along with the purchase or the licensure of being engaged with this. Utilize this stuff, practice with these things, do a downtime practice as to what this is going to look like. Understand that cyber intrusion, cybersecurity risks, these are not things that are going to last a day or two. These have the potential of lasting weeks, if not months. And that is for robust, well-positioned facilities and organizations.
Yeah.
So again, identify that risk. And all it is, you are one click of a mouse or clicking on a link away from being hacked. And then not only being hacked, but there may be ransomware involved with this. What does that look like? What does your cyber insurance look like? How do you activate your local feds to help assist with something like this? This is a terrorist event, if you will. So the feds will want to be involved with this. Usually you have some type of joint or a fusion center within your environment that brings together some of your local cyber folks, your FBI, your local police, law enforcement, and such that meet to go through this stuff to help you work through an event as well. Because it's not only the impact on your infrastructure, but this is your brand image, because now your patient's information is now being exposed potentially to the public. Do you think your patients are going to want to come back to see you? I don't know if they can't trust that their information is protected.
Yeah.
And then you think about that financial impact, the downstream effect of that. What does this look like? There are tools, equipment you can put into place, and I would highly encourage you to speak to your in-house or some of your folks to help guide your steps as to how you can protect your environment and how you can educate your staff on not clicking on erroneous links, various things. And we have a tendency to just want to click it on and take a look. There are different warning signs that I'm sure your local folks can help you to identify so you don't become a victim of such things.
Yes. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. We had a client that wasn't as much phishing as it was social engineering, but they got a invoice from a new vendor and they didn't have protocols in place for their accounts payable clerk to check in, but they spoofed the doctor's email and sent an email to the AP clerk saying, please pay this invoice. It looked as though it came from the doctor and she wasn't going to question that. So she went ahead and paid it a whole bunch of times. And I think they were about 120K in before they figured out that this was not a legit vendor. So yeah, there's a lot of those schemes along with the cyber hacking. But yeah.
And we've seen a breach with United Healthcare, how disruptive that was. We just had an event with our Stryker folks that got hacked. And this happened right after the Iran event started taking place, and they tapped into Strikers. They didn't hold them any ransom. They didn't do any. They wiped their system. So you think about all of your clients, all of your vendors. They wiped their system. So what type of redundancies do you build in? How do you protect? Do you have an alternate network? Sorry to interrupt you and step on you, but I thought that would be a good point to bring across.
That is an excellent point. And you brought up the Change Healthcare cyber attack too, which is sort of in the rearview mirror for most of us now. I think we have clients that are still cleaning up claims from that. So you think about a large, sophisticated entity like that being hacked, and it makes you think about, okay, if the average physician practice also looks like a good target as well. I always say it'd be lovely if these cyber hackers would just use their powers for good. We'd be in a much better place.
Well, to your point, many of the folks that work in our information security realm, they were the ones that went to the good side.
Yes,
Right?
yes, exactly.
I know
Yeah,
now
goodness.
they're quite adroit at what they do. I'm really impressed, but they have to think like a hacker to
Exactly.
be able to against hackers. So there is that line that they do, and I'm grateful they came to the good side.
Exactly. They're wearing the white hats. Yeah, that's good. We like that. Yeah. You talked a little bit about financial impact and financial stability. So I know that's a big concern for practice owners is kind of how do you balance that, right? The patient care, the getting prepared, having all the disaster preparedness plans in place and the business continuity work. How can a well-designed business continuity plan help protect both the patient's safety and also the financial health of the medical group?
Another great question. The financial aspect of this comes about through your planning and preparedness. You are minimizing the gap of whatever that process may look like by putting tools in place to still be able to function during an intrusion or an interruption. You may have the tools in place to do so. Maybe you've identified equipment that you may need. Perhaps you need a different location to be able to provide you practice for a short period of time. And in identifying what equipment would you need, what kind of staffing would you need, what type of scheduling processes would you need, and can that be done remote? One of the benefits of COVID is we moved from the Flintstones to the Jetsons in terms of our capabilities, that we're literally able to work remotely, still be able to function without being on site. But those that need to be on site for those medical screenings, for that process, what tools would you need? What equipment, what staffing would you need if you did have to relocate for a short period of time? You don't want there to be a lapse in your ability to provide care. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if a medical practice is not receiving patients for 2 or 3 weeks, there's going to be a severe, I don't know what that recovery time would look like.
Yeah.
So try to mitigate what that gap would be, how much that response time and the resilience aspect before a full recovery, but put tools in place that would have you functioning in a relatively short period of time, maybe days. I can't expect hours, but perhaps it is just a day or two to be able to move the building next door. Or is there an identified location that you can use? Do you have a secondary practice that you may be able to steer your patients to while the primary is getting back up to speed?
Fantastic. I love all the questions. It's a lot about asking questions. It's also, business continuity is also a lot about people. So how can physicians and leaders prepare their teams so that staff members know their roles and can respond confidently during a kind of unexpected disruption?
One, create a plan. That goes without saying. And then second to that is any plan that's written that's not tested isn't worth the paper it's written on, or the time that's invested in creating the plan.
Yeah.
And what I mean by tested is conducting drills, conducting different things within your environment to practice what you would do. How would you respond? How many folks even in your environment know how to respond to a fire? Can they use a fire extinguisher? And these are prevalent events. What would they do? Prepare them in their work environment or during an earthquake. We do a national shakeout drill every October. Do you practice? Do you get under the desk during these things, or do we just laugh about it and say, this is what we would do? If you don't walk those steps and create that muscle memory, chances are the folks are not going to respond appropriately. Make them work through this. Practice what you put into place. And you may put together some plan that once you start to test it, realize that this doesn't work. So we're going to need to fix this, improve it. And then whatever improvements we did, we'll practice for the next drill. And this doesn't have to be too disruptive to practice a drill. We don't have to deal with mass casualty incidents or anything, but just practice the steps that you would take. Practice your evacuation of your building. Where would you stage your staff? Where would you do a head count? And I apologize that I just keep throwing questions out
That's
there.
great questions. Yeah.
These are critical in the development and growth of your practice and the sustainability. If your staff know how to protect themselves in the event of a disaster, whether they be at work or at home. And one of my quests is to teach all of my staff how to be prepared at home. Because
Yeah.
if they're not prepared at home, they're not coming to work.
Yeah.
How are you going to function without your staff?
Excellent questions, all. I love it. And you had such great experience developing and leading these emergency preparedness exercises. So, talk a little bit about what smaller physician practices can learn from the way hospitals test their plans.
Everything that we do is scalable. You can either scale up or scale down. And it really is. And to say it's that simple, I'm not being facetious.
Yeah.
So you can create a process as to how you would respond, utilize plans that are already out there. There is a site called Asper Tracy. I can't remember the acronym of Asper. Tracy is Technical Resources, and Information Exchange. I'll let your editors fill in the blanks on that one.
We'll fill in that one. Yeah.
It is a wealth of information, and it is not just for hospitals. It is the federal site for plans and tools and best practices. So you can identify these tabletop exercises. There are different types of exercises. A tabletop is a discussion-based exercise. A functional exercise is to test a true process, like evacuation. That would be a functional exercise. A full-scale exercise how would you practice if you would practice with your local law enforcement or your local fire department to implement and understand their response so you can respond a bit more appropriate in your environment, as well as be a little more accommodating when they do show up in your environment to assist them to help you.
Yeah.
So you can scale these up as big as you want, as small as you want, based on those risks that we've identified early on. You don't want to be doing it for me to do a blizzard exercise,
Right.
but earthquake, fire. We deal with active assailant events, unfortunately, a lot more often than we should.
A lot for those lately. Yeah.
But how do you practice that? How do you practice run, hide, fight? There's protocols out there for your staff to protect themselves, how they can identify safe rooms in the facility that they can lock themselves in if they cannot escape. And what tools could they use to defend themselves as a last-ditch effort?
Yeah.
But you demonstrating that to your staff demonstrates your dedication to them. They're coming to work every day to support your practice. Every day they come in. Yes, we all like to eat, and that paycheck is very helpful. But they are coming in every single day to support your practice. What are you doing for them? How are you preparing them to be better prepared to assist us all?
Yeah. Fantastic question. Thank you for that. That one gives me pause as a leader to really think about, okay, how are we prepared for our teams and how are we training them so they can have the best possible response? Chris, I know you and I could talk all day long about this, and I love the conversations. I want to end with one final question for you. That's one of our favorites, which is if you could give one piece of advice to a physician or a healthcare leader who's listening, what would it be?
Prepare, plan to respond. But identify your risk, prepare for that risk, and then practice your response. There are things on our horizon, and I'm sorry to go down this path, but there are weather-related issues that are out there. We're dealing with a foodborne thing going across the country, the vaccine hesitancy. How are you going to prepare for this? Prepare, plan for it, prepare for it, and then create a response process that you then educate your staff in responding appropriately.
Wonderful. Chris, thank you. I so appreciate the conversation as ever and you helping our audience get prepared.
That's my never-ending quest.
I love it. Thank you for joining me today. So appreciate it.
Jill, this has truly been a pleasure, and I'm so grateful for our chance encounter 11 years ago. I marvel at how nice this has been, mutually beneficial, and just nice to meet really good people.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we'll keep in touch. We may need another episode too. So
I'm available to you at your request.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, if you're listening to this and thinking, it's not just one thing, there are multiple parts of my practice that could be running better, I want you to know that you're not alone. Most physicians were never taught how to run the business side of medicine, and yet you're expected to lead complex, multi-million-dollar organizations. That's not a personal failing, it's a systems gap. At Healthy Practices, our operational and strategic consulting is designed to help you close that gap. We work alongside physicians and leadership teams to bring clarity to the business. Everything from workflow and staffing models to financial performance, growth strategy, and long-term planning. The goal is to help you move from reactive and overwhelmed to structured, intentional, and in control. For some practices, that means solving immediate operational pain points. For others, it's about stepping back and building a clear strategy for sustainable growth, profitability, and leadership development. And often, it's both. Because when your systems, your people, and your financial performance are aligned, everything gets easier. Decisions become clearer, teams function better, and the day-to-day stress starts to come down. So if you're ready to take a more intentional look at how your practice is operating and where it could go next, I'd encourage you to reach out and start the conversation. You can find more information in the show notes or at healtheps.com.